Hello, everybody, and welcome to Office Hours. As always, this is where we gather every single day to help anyone and everyone learn about modern web-based production. It's where you can submit questions about media creation and distribution and production and engineering and everything. In all of those forms, you can do that 24/7. The rules are simple. One question per submission, and please remember that someone's going to read it aloud, so construction of the sentences and things like that matter. We just want to be clear and make sure we get accurate information out. If you'd like to put questions into the show, you can use our QR code system. It's popping up on the corner of the screen right now. Take your phone or iPad or whatever else reads QR codes, point it at that, and it will take you into a direct place where you can put questions into the show. Now, that's kind of our quick and easy side system. If you want to get more involved than that, you can use our Makana system, which you can find by going to the Office Hours website and following the little breadcrumbs there. And eventually, you will get to the point where you can actually not only submit questions, but vote on those questions during the show. That's how we determine what we get to fastest and what we spend the most time on. So that's what's happening here. It's time to start the show. So, CJ Covels, our reader today. CJ, what have we got?
First question's from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, Teenage Engineering introduced a medieval-themed version of their popular EP133 sampler. Have you ever seen equipment manufacturers sell product with interesting design themes? And he's got a link.
And thou dost want info? Courtney Gooden shall present it for you for medieval engineering.
I want to know where they found the medieval font 7-segment displays. That's pretty bizarre there. And the fact that all their labeling is in Gaelic, I'm not sure what language that is. Old English of some sort. Manus, comitus, edito, sonus. Yes, Latin. I'm not sure. Fader. So it's interesting, and I knew a guy who was an art director. He had a company called Moth Audio, and they made these amplifiers that were tube-type amplifiers. And I've been looking for the one. This isn't it, but it was similar to this. But he was an Hollywood art director, a prop maker. So he had one of these tube amplifiers, and he had two tubes on the top of it. To make him look more fancy, he found these copper toilet bowl floats. You know, the old toilet bowl floats that used to shut off the valve in the tank, where it used to be made out of copper. They found those, and he would cut them in half and put the two hemispheres up like this and run wires from the top of them and coily wires down to the thing. So it looked like two little mounds. On top of and he said it was for heat dissipation, but no, it was to make it look more interesting.
Make it look cooler. Well, nice. Jesse Kester.
I do think that we need to introduce a liability clause in office hours because I had never heard of teenage engineering before today, Douglas, and this is going to be financially devastating to my family.
CJ.
And for your local performance at Medieval Times, they're getting a new keyboard operator, so they'll be jousting.
So those of you who got instruction in Latin when you were young, you thought it was never going to be useful, welcome to this. Craig wants to get into this. Craig?
Yeah, I've just been diving deeper into this website since we first started talking about it pre-show. And there's a bunch of other stuff going on here. And I think we have actually seen something from them before because they have a USB mic as well, along with a bunch of speakers and voice record, like memo recorders that have spinning drives. Like it looks like it's a tape recorder, but obviously it's not. Just they've got some really, really, really interesting products in here that are across the spectrum. So it's really interesting. It's worth a dive as long as you're not worried about your wallet.
Yeah, I've been hearing about their brand for some years now, and everybody seems to really like what they do. I think they spend a lot of time and effort putting into it, even though they certainly have a tongue-in-cheek marketing process. Jesse, do you want to come back in and say something else?
Just to take it back to the initial question, Just to take it back to the initial question, you see bold design from companies every now and then. I think we see a lot from Apple, and it doesn't feel like bold design from Apple because it becomes integrated into our everyday lives. But you also see bold design like DeLorean Motor Company, Cybertruck, places like that. It either becomes standard or it stands out forever as being a semi-disastrous idea. Just to take it back to the actual question.
Yeah, there you go. All right, let's go to our next question.
Alan Scott in Fredericton says, looking at specs for a sampler, the website mentions, also Teenage Engineering, 46 kilohertz, 16-bit. What's with the 60 or 46 kilohertz? I don't recall anybody recommending that.
As you can imagine, that created some discussion here as well. So, Jesse, you want to start us off?
It seems to me that Teenage Engineering is a design above all else company. They're a Swedish company, and their website is not covered, but there's a substantial amount of katakana on the website, which I'm assuming they just choose because they think it looks correct for their design goals. I believe, and I could be wrong, that this 46 kilohertz decision that they made is just because we are not the engineers. I can't get inside their head, but I'm assuming it's because they thought the number 46 would look better on their website and on their print materials than 44.1, 48. That's my assumption. And because it's a sampling device, it's all operating internally. It doesn't have to. I assume it can, but it doesn't have to interface with other sampling rates. So maybe it's okay. I don't know. We haven't used the device, and we can't get inside the engineers' heads.
You sure it wasn't just they didn't want to decide on 48 or 44.1, so they just split the difference and found something with a dartboard in the middle? Courtney, what do you think?
Well, at first I thought it was a typo, but then I looked at the website, and you see they've based their sampler on a cow's digestive system here. So,
Well, of course they did.
so maybe that has something to do with the 46.48. That's the number of time a cow chooses cud before it comes.
We're having a lot of fun with it, but these products I've been hearing about for a while, and people who use them seem to like them. They certainly have an interesting aesthetic going on. So give it a shot if you're looking for samplers. Let's go to our next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, how can you determine the highest selling price for your used production gear and vintage computing items on eBay and Craigslist?
Nigel's going to start us off this morning. Nigel?
So the tough thing here is that you have to decide what you're willing to accept for it. And that's probably as good an answer as any. But I lurk on eBay. I've stopped using Craigslist for various reasons. I've had lots of bad experiences, particularly with technology on Craigslist, so I don't use that anymore. But I hang around on eBay. I watch the auctions. I watch the price, the buy now price, and I try and work out where I'm going to be. I have to tell you, though, for lots of low-end technology, I really try and find a place to donate it to. So I've stopped trying to sell things, $50, $100. It's a lot of work. I try and find schools or technical colleges or other places that might like the technology. There's a rapid drop-off in pricing. It's almost a cliff. But the only way I've known on eBay is to lurk and watch and estimate.
CJ?
I'm with Nigel. My brothers and sisters always like it when new stuff comes out because they know that the hand-me-downs are about to get better. So I try to pass it on as well. And I look at, but in eBay, I do look at recently sold listings to try to get an idea for what folks are willing to pay. But it's pretty, scams are prevalent now. So I also have to look at the things that are too good to be true. A shameless plug, if you happen to have some vintage gear that's still in use that you'd like to share, we're talking about vintage gear on Friday, and we'd love to see you.
Oh, that's right. The show on Friday is discussing that. I may come and play because I have one of the oldest still functioning things that I've ever owned behind me, somewhere on that shelf.
Sorry for the distraction.
That's all right. No problem. Jesse Kester.
First of all, that's an excellent tease. I have the oldest high-functioning thing. What is that thing? I have to be there on Friday to find out what that thing is.
That's right.
Very well played. The one thing I want to caution you about eBay or Craigslist is the data pool that you're looking at is deceptive. So everything that has a buy it now price, you'll think that that's the price. But please remember, everything that has a buy it now price on eBay has not been sold at that price. So this data pool is deceptive. And what you'll find is that the highest price you can get for your item is exactly what people ended up paying for it.
Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, you can price it astronomically, and sometimes I'll go on eBay and see, here's a pocket recorder listed for $7,000, and I went, that's a $200 pocket recorder, and it's used. Why are they asking $7,000? There's some kind of tax dodge going on there, I think. But also, before you put your used gear up on eBay at what you think it's worth, maybe 50% of what you paid for it, browse eBay and look at it, because sometimes you don't know what the market is for, what you have could be considered very rare, and it could be, 10 times what you paid for it is what people are willing to pay for stuff like that. If you let lowball it, then you may be letting a lot of stuff go. I know I had a teenage kid clear out my storeroom one day, and then I found some old cartridges for CompuPrompt, the prompting system, that I had laying around. And, he just cleaned out all that stuff and put a bunch of stuff up on eBay. And then I discovered that one of those cartridges has just been sitting in my storeroom for a long time. Sold for $900. It's like I should have sold it on eBay if I had known the price, because it was such a rarity.
Yeah, collectibles, hard to keep track of that. Craig, your thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to second what Jesse had said about the fact that you rarely actually see the sell price, usually just what people are trying to advertise for it. Some sites, I believe Reverb does for audio gear, will give you recent sale prices. But again, as has been said before, all this stuff is, if you're selling used stuff, it's all contingent on the condition it's in and the timing as well. You've seen stuff go for radically different prices within a month or two, just based on, how much else is out there as well.
Absolutely. Next question.
Next question from Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia. And Harold asks, where can we get a custom backdrop for our event, similar to the ones movie stars use in Hollywood when they get their pictures taken on the red carpet? It would be great to have one for our video wall.
Jeffrey's going to start us off. Jeffrey Powers?
Any print shop will do it. If you're in the United States, you have FedEx, Kinko's, whatever you want to call it. You have Staples, you have Office Depot. They'll print any type of banner. You can get a vinyl banner. The vinyl banners will cause a reflection, so you want to get something more fabric-based, especially if you're going to have a lot of flashes going on in the background there. And then, of course, it gets nice stretched fabric, and then you get a cowboy stand with a crossbar. You can put that on there and have a nice stretched out canvas as there. But they'll do almost any type of printing nowadays, yeah.
Nigel?
Yeah, a quick Google for step and repeat will find you many, many places that will do these for you. Relatively simple design. Really, just to pick up on a point that Jeffrey made, I wanted to add, you need to decide how permanent, how often you want to use it. There are some very expensive mounting and holding systems that can cost a lot more than the actual step and repeat that you're actually using. So decide how long you're going to need it for, whether you're really going to need to stick it to a wall, hang it up, where you're going to put it, and then just search away and you'll find someone to do one for you.
Jesse?
If I can encourage you to move in a slightly different direction, the step and repeat with the white sheet of cloth and a whole bunch of little logos all over it, it's a bit antiquated, and it won't encourage people to take and share their own photos. You can make people stand in front of a step and repeat, and they will do it. But if you're integrating this backdrop with a video wall, what you want to consider is the branding of the video, and seeing if you can make this wall as seamless as possible to integrate with with the style guide of the video that you're going to be broadcasting on your video wall anyway. You can include a logo, but just what you want is a well-designed, integrated backdrop that kind of flows with your video content. And we found that this excites and delights people much more than the increasingly antiquated step and repeat that I feel like you're describing.
CJ?
Friends don't let friends step and repeat. Don't do it. Think about big logos on either side of the people have an idea of how many folks are going to be in the shots that you're taking. So you can kind of mock up a focal length and say, okay, if are these two large logos spaced well for groups of 2, groups of 3, groups of 4, and you can kind of do a previs that way. The other thing that I would do, if you're making this kind of a bespoke backdrop, if you're printing it on that stretch fabric like Jeffrey mentioned, we do this a lot at trade shows, and we find that if you stretch it and then spray some water on it a couple hours before the event, as that water evaporates, the wrinkles go away, so it looks really smooth and nice. And the last thing I would say is if you can inconspicuously, maybe near the floor, put a center line, like put a little center marker in there. That way, when folks are lining up, you can say, hey, you see that little dot? Now you're going to be perfectly framed for your glamour shots.
Nigel?
Yeah, lots of good points about step and repeats. I just wanted to make one observation. If you're doing a professional news gathering event, high profile event, all the comments and the negatives about step and repeat are true. If your event is fun, low key, there may be a thing you're trying to do. There may be a place where you're trying to simulate what it might be like to be a movie star at an event. So don't let the professional answer get in the way of the fun answer, because there's a fun time to do this stuff as well.
Should you set up flashes then and make sure that there's a lot of paparazzi type flashes? Courtney Gooden has another word on this.
Yeah, friends don't let friends use step and repeats. There's companies that do this. Here's one called Ace Displays that does photo shoot backdrops. You get them a variety of sizes with photographic images that are nice, landscapes, things like that, or you can have your logo or anything that you want that's pertinent to whatever your organization is that you can order. They're a little bit pricey, $400 to $600, but these are pretty good size, 8 feet by 8 feet by 8 feet, etc. So you can get them and print anything that you want on them. I believe Ace Displays, American made, but shop around and don't use the step and repeat. If Alex were here, he would slap your little hand.
Greg Kadoki.
Yeah, I agree with the stuff about the whole branded step and repeats. If you're going to do something where you're using an image backdrop or something like Courtney was looking at, or if you have to use a step and repeat because of clients' demands or something, a couple things to remember. The idea about the spike mark on the floor is a great idea. Make sure that the backdrop is big enough for what people are shooting for, if you're going to have lots of people as a group or something, and what's going to be behind it. Better to have it too big than too small.
And we've got a note here that Chris Sabato in the chat said fabricguys.com is a good source. fabricsignguys.com. Cool. The one thing I'm wondering, what would happen if you did a step and repeat as a QR code? Would it trigger everything automatically? Would people go to your website? No, I'm sorry I said that. I hope it doesn't work like that, because that would be a horrible way to get clicks. Anyway, next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas asks us to compare Canva to Photoshop and Photoshop Express for all-around photo editing and graphics tasks. And he's got a link to a PC World article.
Jeffrey Powers.
So Photoshop to Canva, half the features for half the price is the bottom line. For Photoshop Express, that's a software that you install on the computer. That's it. Whereas Photoshop, they're now doing a lot of online stuff. You can get the Adobe Express, so you can do a lot of things. So if you don't need those features, Canva's perfect for that. But if you start getting, and if you're making banners for your company or anything like that. But if you really want to start digging down and having some fun with the graphics, then you probably do want to look into something other than Canva. And will Canva eventually migrate and start doing more higher end stuff? Most likely. Will they raise the price because of it? Probably.
And Jesse Kester.
If you're able to replace Photoshop with Canva, you're not using Photoshop. And you've made the right choice to use Canva instead.
Okay. Next question.
From Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. It's been a minute, but I had a request from a client for a DVD. What do you use to author DVDs nowadays?
Oh boy, the number of times we've gotten this question over the years, but it has diminished. Jesse, what do you think? What are you using? Are you using anything?
First of all, rest in peace, Encore. We hardly knew ya. You can turn to Final Cut Pro X and iMovie to author DVDs. Do not expect anything complicated at all. You'll be able to put your timeline on a DVD, put the DVD in a player, and it will play automatically, or you can have it, like I think you can tell it to, wait to click play before it plays, but you're not going to get complicated or nuanced authoring. You will just get your file onto a DVD that can play in a player.
Courtney?
And if you're on a Macintosh, be forewarned that Apple is discontinuing the Super Drive, which is their DVD burner, external DVD burner that plugs in over USB, because they haven't built them into any of their computers in a while now. So if you're using Toast, hey, does that bring back a memory? To create a DVD on your Mac, you may have to find authoring software. Most DVD burners will come with free authoring software. But as was mentioned earlier, most editorial packages have a means of burning a DVD with the DVD format for the compression and the format for building the menus to link to this different chapters, etc.
Maybe my DVD burners become a vintage piece of equipment. I can make some good money off of it. CJ, thoughts?
I don't know if Apple discontinued the Super Drive or if they just finally sold the last one, because it's been, they didn't even update the box. But we still, Toast is still a thing though. I bought a Parallels desktop, to run a Windows software on my Mac a year ago, and as part of the the bundle of things that you got when you bought Parallels, they included a copy of Toast.
There you go.
Oddly enough, so Toast is still in development, and they're getting ready for Sequoia.
It's now burnt toast, but
That's right.
It's blue toast. It'll do Blu-rays, blue toast.
As long as it's not avocado toast. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia. The Blackmagic Camera app has been updated to 2.0. There is now a feature camera app for the iPad. Has the panel had an opportunity to check out the Blackmagic Cam app 2.0?
Jesse, have you?
I've noodled a tiny bit. These updates are coming too fast and furious right now. Give us a couple more days to try it out. We'll be taking out the 2.0 today. And the big test that I want to do today is to see how well it works as a light meter, and that if we can take the settings from the Blackmagic app and apply them to like a Pentax K1000 or something, and get properly exposed shots. So we'll be checking in by the end of the week with that.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see the kind of arms race since Apple decided to do their own camera app. Now, Apple and Blackmagic are kind of leading that charge. Very useful tools. I mean, I'm shooting more with my iPhone these days than I did before just because it's easier. CJ, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, I was getting my demo ready, and I forgot to raise my hand. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So one quick thing for the Blackmagic Camera app. The most exciting thing I think that we're looking forward to playing with is the remote control. So the advent of, or the plus of having this as an iPad app is that you can actually have 4 different iPhones remotely monitored on that iPad. So if you're trying to look at color balance or framing or just general monitoring, this is able to do that point to point. And the only place that you really see that in the settings on the app is if you're in the, if I go to my Apple TV here, if you're here on your phone and you go to remote camera control there on the left, you can say use this iPhone as the controller. Use this iPhone as the controller on whichever Wi-Fi network, or as the remote camera. And then you have your options in there. And then I think the only other one was that it'll do now 100 frames per second HD video. But the Blackmagic Camera, I'm so happy that they're continuing to pour development effort and energy into this, because it's like I was shooting some video at a concert that I was at, and I had the stock camera app up, and I was getting all sorts of weird stuff. Like there was a pulse width modulated LED light that was flashing in a way that wasn't aesthetically pleasing. And the computational photography in the iPhone camera app was causing like a weird halo around some of the singers. So closed that down, opened it up in the Blackmagic Camera app, adjusted some settings, got the shutter angle just right. It didn't have any of that, didn't have as much of the processing or maybe any processing, and I got the video back and it looked really spectacular. And as Courtney pointed out earlier, there's an Android version now, right? So
that's really nice. There's just so much development energy happening in the mobile device space. It's pretty stunning how fast this is developing. And I know on Apple's side, just because I heard it at the keynote, the resources they're pouring into mobile filmmaking is pretty stunning. I think they're expecting a lot of young people coming up to be using their phones and their iPads and things like that for production more and more. So there's a lot of money going into that. And I'm sure on the Android and PC side, they're after the same young market who do not have the kind of big computer infrastructure that a lot of us do. So it's a coming thing. Courtney, you had some thoughts?
I was just going to point out that on the Android version, be forewarned that it only works with a certain number of phones. The latest Samsung S series and the Pixel series 7 and 8, I believe. So it's a limited number of Android phones it'll work with. It won't work with just any Android phone off the shelf. So
I think to do the same
compatibility list before you download.
I think it's a little bit the same on the Apple side. Unless you have pretty much the latest hardware, you're not going to get much bandwidth of 4 signals coming into your old iPad and the ability to cut smoothly between them. So, yeah, it requires some new investment on all sides. Next question.
Michael Forrest in Edinburgh, UK. Can you show an example of a checklist that would be used by a production crew before going live?
Jesse, do you want to dive into that?
No, I can't, because all of our pre-flight checklists have very sensitive information about the client and the talent and who's supposed to be where and what we're doing with the client and the talent over the course of the broadcast. But what I can do is talk a little bit about what would go into a pre-flight checklist and how we design ours. So our pre-flight checklists are scheduled out by time, and we don't go higher resolution than 5-minute chunks. So that means that 6 o'clock, 6:05, 6:10, 6:15. We don't do 6:01, 6:03. But our pre-flights tell us who on the staff is supposed to be where and when, which talent is supposed to be where and when, which pieces of equipment are turned on when, and when we start the live stream, when we make the live stream public, when we start our countdown clock. So pretty much all the information of who can be doing what and when, and if somebody is not where they're supposed to be at the correct time, then we have a master document that we can refer them to explain why they made a mistake and how that affected the production. And we get very nuanced with where people can be and what they can do, right down to like, this is your 10-minute block for going to Crafty to get the snacks that you want for the next 45 minutes before we get that level of nuance in the information and the permissions of what people can be doing and where they can be going. Of course, bathroom breaks are at need. We don't schedule those in. Those are, you do those when you have to. But we generally have at least 4 hours before a broadcast goes live. We have the pre-flight scheduled out for about 4 hours. That doesn't mean that we have instructions every 5 minutes for the 4 hours before the broadcast. That just means we know where everyone is going to be at least 4 hours before we start broadcasting. And if it's later in the day, like if we're doing the broadcast at 6 in the afternoon or something, we know where people are going to be from 8 o'clock in the morning. It just isn't realistic all the time to have, if you're having your broadcast start at 6 a.m., you don't need to know where people are the night before on your pre-flight for that broadcast.
And as Mickey says in the chat to Michael Forrest, each production has its own checklist, and each crew member has their own individual checklist. There's not just one single checklist. That's been my experience, too. Ever since I came across an article, there's a gentleman named Atul Gawande who was the keynote speaker or at I think one of Harvard's graduating classes, and he's a doctor, among other things, and he was writing how powerful a checklist is in a surgical suite. And I was just so impressed with that article that I think that was my turnaround. This was maybe 10 years ago of starting to pay attention to checklists. I don't think there's a more powerful tool for getting things right out there. And it's such a simple, traditional thing. It's built into most of our phones now. And I got to tell you, I'm using that little function of the notepad, going into checklist mode and checking off things probably as much as any other app I use, and I think it's made my life easier. You have that momentary inspiration. You go, I got to remember this, I got to remember that, and remembering is sometimes problematic. So encoding that into a checklist and going through it really does improve, in my case, the ability to not make mistakes. So in a surgical suite, that can be mission critical. Of course, this is production, but still, you don't want to get there and have that one connector that you desperately need to connect everything not there. And if it's on your checklist and you just religiously go through and make sure the checklist is complete before you go into the field, it really helps. Jesse, you have a final thought here?
Yeah, everybody's had the experience where they walk from the kitchen to the living room to get something, and when they're in the living room, they can't remember what they came in there to get. Even if your task is one single task, it is possible to forget what you're doing, and this is where pen and paper comes in.
I resemble that remark. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, I need help choosing a barcode scanning app for equipment and need features like inventory management, reporting, supplemental information, and export options. Kaywa claims to be the best mobile barcode scanning app.
CJ, do you have an opinion on this?
I do. I have had mixed results and mixed success with mobile barcode scanning apps. And I think if you're just, scanning the UPC code to get the calorie count on a snack in a calorie counting app, maybe that, occasional barcode use is okay. If you're doing any kind of heavy duty scanning and you need it to be reliable and you need it to work quickly, the right time, every time, I think your best bet is to just go with your tried and true, laser barcode scanner. What you do though is you get something like, we have a bunch of these little rings, and what the rings do is it connects to your phone or to your computer or your tablet just like a Bluetooth keyboard, and then when you scan the barcode, it just returns that as text to the computer. So this allows you to just wear this little thing on your index finger. You scan the barcode, and then all of a sudden, that is entered into the computer. Now, the flexibility that gives you is now, regardless of what physical device you're using, you can integrate with a solution from a professional solution from a company like Wasp, who makes barcode scanners, or even I have some colleagues who have used, this not a joke, use Claris FileMaker. FileMaker is still in development, and you can do inventory management solutions and make them custom just to you. But depending on how far you're going to build that out will kind of drive whether you need to make a bespoke solution for that.
Nice. Next question.
Robert White in Jacksonville, Florida asks, for doing local events, is it better to rent your equipment or buy it outright? And he comes to us via the QR code.
Craig Kadoki is going to start us off. Craig?
This is a classic. It depends. It depends on how many events you're doing, how much the equipment, what equipment it is you need to buy. Owning your own equipment is going to be better as far as your comfort level of reliability, knowing where the equipment's been, how it's been used. But obviously, there's the cost of renting is much cheaper, and you also have to then deal with the availability potential if the rental house has it in or not.
Jeffrey Powers.
If you need something like a high-end lens that is like several $1,000s, then renting, and it's only for 1 gig, then renting it is the better solution to do anything like that. Otherwise, if you're got the standard rig, multiple cameras or whatnot, it's better to actually have and be able to maintain your own multiple cameras instead of hoping that one camera didn't get dropped in a river somewhere down the line. And of course, the last thing is if you are putting these up in public places where a lot of people can get to it and it could possibly be damaged or stolen, then you might want to consider the rental versus buyout. I'd still do the buyout though, and then of course put good insurance on it so you could get it replaced. So yeah, one-offs would probably be the best solution.
Jesse Kester.
If it looks like we're going to be renting the gear more than 3 times in 1 year and the gear is less than $10,000, we buy it.
Cordy Gooden.
Yeah, I agree with Jesse. It depends on the expense of the gear, the number of times you're going to use it, and if the percentage of its cost is more than about 20% for the rental, then you might think about buying it if you think you're going to use it more than once. If you're only going, if this is a strange request that you know you don't use every day, then definitely rent it. The problem is with rental gear, you have to consider the extra time that it costs you. You have to go to the rental company and pick it up or have it delivered. Then you got to check it out, make sure it's not damaged, it works like it's supposed to. If you own it, you maintain it, and you know it's ready to go out, you can have it on the shelf, and you know it can be put into service at a moment's notice. So that saves you some time if you own it. So make sure you take those costs into consideration when determining whether to rent or buy.
Jesse.
And do not factor resale value or rental value when purchasing. So don't think that you can take your gear and put it on ShareGrid and make 10 times back what you spent on it, or that it resells for 75% of the price today. So in a year and a half, it'll continue to resell for 75% of the price. That's a completely irresponsible math. The price you pay is the price you pay for the item.
CJ Cobble.
Yeah, Mickey in the chat points out it's making sure that your business earns money from the acquisition makes it a fairly simplified question. It gets to be pretty black and white as you're doing ROI calculations. So you've got to think to yourself, how often am I going to use this equipment? How much would it cost to rent that equipment? Know the price of a rental, but how many times do you need to rent it when you could have just bought it? And then the other thing is look at I call them the intangibles, or the invisible costs, and that has to do with setup time, like Courtney was saying, going to the rental house. But also, as Alex alluded to a couple days ago on the show, if you can improve your setup time by owning the gear, and you're able to load in faster and then are saving on union labor or any labor whatsoever, then all of a sudden that ROI calculation starts to get accelerated on when you're actually making money. Remember, if you can boil almost all of any purchase in life or in business down to two things. Is it a tractor or is it a big TV? Is it entertainment or is it making me money?
The only thing I'll add to this discussion, because I think it's been an excellent discussion on that, is for me, the complexity of a piece of equipment also has to do with whether or not I'm going to rent it or buy it. If there are tons of menus and I need to understand it deeply, I definitely want to own it because I want to have weeks, sometimes months of experience operating it, such that if I'm in the field and serious money's on the line because I've got a big crew and a big cast and anything like that, I don't want to wonder how and pull out the manual and try to figure out how to make this function work. So the week or two beforehand that I'm learning the equipment is as important, and that means I'm probably going to have to own it. I've rented things that I've been unqualified to use, and it's just been a struggle on set. And so in that case, I'd prefer to live with it for a while before I try to use it in a client-facing situation. Interesting discussion. Next question.
Another QR code question, this time from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. When it comes to studio headphones, what's the importance and difference between open, semi, closed back? Does it affect the ohms in the headphones or performance?
Courtney Gooden.
Doesn't necessarily affect the ohms in the headphones, but a couple of considerations to have, and whether you get over the ear or open air headphones, which just have foam pads that sit on top of your ear, is if you're going to be recording with them. If you're going to be recording with them and there's going to be a sensitive mic within a few inches of those headphones, in other words, you're playing back music or playing back vocals or something else into those headphones for private monitoring while you're singing or talking into a microphone, go with the over-the-ears that are sealed. That way there's less chance of leakage between the headphones and the microphone. Also, if you're in a high ambient noise area where you want to filter out the noise, you want to get over the ear to block out, or even custom molded in the ear. So those are the two ways to block out external sounds from confusing you. Let's say you're recording dialogue, and you can hear the person's dialogue direct leaking into your ears, and you can hear the person's dialogue coming through the microphone and into your headphones. And you want to keep those two things separate so that you don't think it sounds, so you can hear more what it sounds like over the microphone versus what it sounds like just coming through to your ear, and you can get them a variety of impedances. You choose that based on your amplifier and what impedance your amplifier is looking to use. The larger microphones tend to be 8 ohms or 4 ohms, or sometimes you'll see 480 ohms, 400 ohms in that area. But look at the headphone amplifier that you're going to be driving it with and see what it's rated for as far as driving.
CJ.
And a friendly reminder, those AKG K240s are still on sale at a steep discount. They're $66 now if you're in the market. Very nice.
There you go. Okay. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, what studio furniture makers make racks with a slanted top for a mixer like this one? There's a sound.
Jeffrey Powers.
link.
Oh, excuse me. I jumped on you there. Jeffrey Powers.
Well, I guess Soundtown makes them, so that's a bonus right there. There's several different types of, and it really depends on if you want something wood. These are racks that most likely get pushed into a corner underneath a desk or anything like that. So they're not too tall, they're not too big. So if you want a wood version, there's a few companies out there. If you want like a molded plastic, you can check with Gator. You can check with SKB. They make similar stuff where you can even modularize it if you want casters on the bottom, or if you don't, they have different options for there. Otherwise, if you need something totally custom, there's local wood makers that would definitely jump on the opportunity to make something like that. It might cost more than $349 for this one. But if the big concern is putting it together, you can always do things like TaskRabbit or take it somewhere where they would actually assemble it for you.
Next question.
From Aaron Grencarl in Flagstaff, Arizona, looking for an affordable method to upload videos online, then having clients download them. I have Dropbox, but was wondering if something like AWS is a better service for that. Essentially, large files going up and going down on the internet.
Jeffrey Powers, start us off.
Well, it really depends on if these are just for them to view or them to use. The cheapest way is to basically just put them up on YouTube, make them private, and then send them via email address. So they would then use their email address to log into YouTube and download or access the files. They could get a third-party downloader to get them from there. Other than that, you could, the standard, like Vimeo would be a alternate right there. AWS definitely is an option. Depends on how big you're talking with these files and how many people are going to be downloading them. So you might want to do a little bit of calculation as to the rates because they're ever fluctuating. But for the most part, they're pretty low cost. So if you're talking like 20 people are downloading a video that's, let's say, 3 gigs, your overall cost is going to be, probably at least under $5 for sure.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I used to use Dropbox, but I've been on productions where they've used Dropbox and they'd synchronize everybody together that's on that production to that one Dropbox to look for the certain files that they're going to need. The problem is Dropbox had a habit of downloading them from the Dropbox in the cloud to all the local drives that were part of that group. So if you're not interested in the 12 gigabyte video file that somebody else's needs, and you're just looking for a script, your machine's going to be tied up downloading that 12 gigabyte video file, even though you don't want it necessarily. So I moved to Google Drive, where I just store the large media files and large files like that. And it's very easy. You have to pay for it once you get above their free limit. It's free for a certain small amount. But I think I pay for 10 gigabytes, something like that. And so any larger files, I stick them up there because then you can just right-click on them and enter an email address and say share with this person, and you can set up the security so that they have to have a password to log in, or only people they can just click on the link and go to it if you don't want to set security on it, or you can password protect it, and you can have a list of people that can access that file, and so it will check to make sure that person's on the list before it downloads them to that file. So look at Google Drive. They're pretty well set up for storing large files and downloading them to different people.
Craig Kadoki.
Yeah, Dropbox is an okay solution. Just never download their software. Just use it as a cloud storage. Is my advice. Their syncing stuff is just mind numbing for me. The Google Drive I'd also recommend as well. Or if you're on a Mac and if you're on a Mac and have an iCloud account, you could also use the iCloud account. It's another option.
And that's what I do most of the time. I will say that the paid services do have some pluses to them. I used to use Frame.io a lot, and it's got a thing called transfer that saturates your upload. So if you're particularly in production and you're trying to get things up to the cloud and then let people get things down to the cloud, that always turned out to be much faster. I'm not using it as much anymore. I'm using Alteon.io for most of those things, but that's a special case, and you can't get it for free. So how much is your time worth is really one of the questions here. Jeffrey Powers, you wanted to come back and...
Yeah, one last thing. If you're using Google Drive and you've got like several different videos or a large video, Google might try to zip up the file before it downloads, and a couple others will do the exact same thing. So yeah, keep that in mind because that's going to take more time for it to get ready for it to download to somebody's desktop, and then they'll have to unzip it to see the files.
Courtney, you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, and if you're going to be uploading a lot of files, you might look into getting fiber if you don't have it, because on most cable modems, et cetera, the upload speed is usually limited to 10 to 12 megabits. I just got fiber, and I now have 980 megabits up, and it's symmetrical usually on most fiber connections. So look into Fios or AT&T Fiber. If you're going to be uploading a lot of files, that will improve the bottleneck that you're going to have in uploading large files to a cloud-based server.
Craig?
One last quick thing. If you're only doing a couple of files, if you're doing lots of stuff, yeah, get one of the higher end services. But if you only have to do just a couple and it's a rare thing, another option, of course, on the cheap is WeTransfer.
Absolutely. I've used that in the past. Jack Cannon in the chat says, don't forget about LucidLink as well. So we've got all sorts of options for you. Hope you find exactly the right solution, Aaron. Next question.
Next question's from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. This one's for Nigel Dessau. If you had a chance to look at iOS, tvOS, etc., 18 betas, WRT and HomeKit, thoughts on that? And newer 18.1 with Apple Intelligence, again, WRT HomeKit. tvOS is the HomeKit Hub here, although I have a HomeBridge Hub too.
Wow. Nigel, can you help out?
Well, so I have had a quick look. For some reason, Apple combined their HomeKit announcements with the audio announcements, so it's not entirely clear exactly what they're trying to do. So here's I think the two important pieces that we do know about. You can now choose the hub you want, and you can create a guest access system. So typically when you have a guest around the house, you don't want to give them the same permission. So you can do that. There's a couple of fun things, like they say that you can control your robot vacuum cleaner, but they don't say which robot vacuum cleaners, and you can do electricity monitoring. I think all of that stuff really comes down to the implementation of Matter. So we've been talking for 3 years now about how Matter is going to change the world, and Matter doesn't quite matter yet, but it's getting closer. And clearly Apple's configuration and integration of Matter is starting to have some impact. Now, as to the intelligence tools, that's a longer conversation about how you would use intelligence and what works in home automation and what doesn't. But I don't use it because I don't use the beta because my hub is the Apple TV. And I've bricked an Apple TV using a beta before, and it's a very unpleasant experience, and Apple is very unhelpful about that. Plus the fact most of what I have in the house is actually Lutron or Crestron or stuff like that. But if you're a hobbyist and you like to play, there's some stuff to play with here. Just be careful planning a big whole home implementation, because it still is not the most stable way of doing it.
Nigel, I want a T-shirt that says "Matter doesn't matter." I don't know why, but I want it very
Matter doesn't matter yet.
Okay. It's a very time-space continuum in my brain. I'm trying to figure it out, and I can't, so we're going to the next question.
Next question's from David Brady in New York, New York. What is needed to get started with DMX control on OS X? Acquired a few lights that do wireless DMX, but what interface is needed on the computer?
CJ, can you help him out?
Yeah, so if you're using wireless DMX, you're going to need to figure out, are the lights utilizing SACN or ArtNet in order to get into the computer? And then or I know some folks have used I think it's ENTEC, ENTEC, USB to DMX adapters to get them in there. Then Craig's got one right there. There it is, the ENTEC. And then once you're on the Mac, then you're going to look for one application you might want to look into is LightKey, and then the other one is Shamsys, CHAMSYS. Those are two Mac OS versions. There is an ArtNet app that you can get, but I think that's one's Windows only. So if you're on the Mac, look for Shamsys and LightKey.
Jeffrey Powers.
It's also going to depend on what lights you did get. If you've got like a series of lights, like for instance, I have a set of PAR lights that are DMX enabled. There are a couple that are wireless that would go right into the machine without too much. But then I have some other ones that require an interface because as CJ pointed out, there's different protocols that are involved there. We wouldn't know until we know what the light brands that you have are in there, and then of course we can tell you if that's something that you need an external box for, or if it can go right into the machine.
CJ, have a quick follow-up?
Yeah, and this might seem like a too basic of a reminder, but for anyone who's doing this, if you're getting USB to a DMX cable, make sure that you know if you're buying 3-pin or 5-pin. Because it won't work if it's wrong.
There you go. Next question.
From Matt Halverson in Brookings, South Dakota, we're looking to paint a wall green in our studio. What's the hex code or RGB code you recommend for green screen work? Is there an industry standard color?
Jesse Custer.
Now, it sounds like you're trying to build a budget-friendly green screen wall, and I'm not going to recommend a specific hex code, but what I will tell you is consider buying actual green screen wall paint. It runs $100 to $150 a gallon, and worth every penny. That's not expensive when it comes to green screen paint. That's what it's worth. And what you do is you take that actual green screen paint, you make your own little paint chip, and you take it to Home Depot or wherever you get your paints, and have them replicate that. What you're going to do is use that for your 2 coats of primer, and then you use the good, expensive stuff on the final coat of paint that you put on for your budget-friendly green screen wall. This paint does go, the actual green screen paint does go beyond regular off-the-shelf paint in how it reflects the light, and you really want that last coat reflecting the light exactly the way it's supposed to for clean extraction. And the amount of time and money you'll save in the long run on keying, on getting those mats just right along the skin. You'll save so much time and money for that extra $50 or $100 you spend for the gallon of the real stuff on your final coat. Good luck.
Courtney?
Yeah, what Jesse said, the Roscoe makes some professional green screen paint, and some things to consider if you're trying to do the Home Depot route and getting it matched up. It makes a difference as to what the finish of that paint is. It has to be super flat. You don't want anything that's going to reflect. There's companies besides Roscoe. Here's one called ProPsych that makes a virtual green screen chroma key paint for about $122. But there are a number of companies that specialize in this because it's a fluorescent green, not just green. That fluoresces under a little more ultraviolet light. It's a little punchier than your regular greens, and it's completely flat. That's the other important thing. Flat dries to a completely flat finish.
Next question.
Next question's from Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Audio for a 100-foot by 50-foot room that suffers from horrible acoustics, echoes. 300 people banquet with open bar, stage at the short side. How would you get good audio throughout the length of the room without deafening people? 75% spoken word, 25% music.
Jeffrey Powers, what's your solution for him?
Well, we're going to need to know a little bit more about the room before we can make a real assessment. I mean, if there's a whole bunch of glass windows that are involved, if what type of ceilings involved, if it's metal ceiling, if it's a drop ceiling or anything like that. From the stage, I would start at the stage and take it out from there. Maybe do an RTA of the room to see what frequencies we need to address at first, and then work from there. You could always do things like pad up the walls, and with it's stuff like beer signs and that are not metal can be a real help there. But just doing the RTA first is the most important part to get the idea of what frequencies, where it's and walking around and hearing where it's going to be higher versus lower in the room.
Craig?
So a couple things, because you didn't mention anything about budget or equipment availability. I'm going to go big. If you can fly the speakers, so the speakers are angling down, not straight out, and then have a bunch of delays. Hang delay systems further back through the room so you can keep the overall level down. The main goal in any PA really should be equal coverage as far as not just frequency response, but gain across a very narrow range across the entire seating area. So if you can do that by putting in delays and having them properly timed, that'll help not have to have too much energy being put into the room from any one spot.
And Jesse?
And do remember that you can go with a less is more approach to the actual program design of the evening. And what I mean by that is keep the keynote speakers down to the absolute minimum. Don't, spend 3 hours of somebody talking into the system. And for the musician, go with a classical guitarist, somebody who's playing some nice, mellow, quiet jazz. And that'll go a long way to not deafening your audience.
Courtney?
I agree with Craig, too. Keep low-energy speakers spread throughout the room rather than drivers at the front of the room trying to blast them, because you're going to deafen the people at the front. You're going to create more standing wave echoes. Better to have a bunch of small drivers scattered through the length of the room, maybe delay if you need it. But, for example, if you watch the 2021 Academy Awards, they were held in Union Station, which if you've ever been in Union Station in L.A., it's all marble and concrete, and it has a decay time of about 4 seconds for any noise that goes in there. So it's a horrendous echo, and they had to deal with PA for all these people sitting at tables. So you look carefully at the tables, and it looks like there's little cones. I thought they were fans. This was during COVID. On the tables, but no, those were the drivers for the PA system. So there were individual speakers at each table throughout the entire venue. So that's how they handled PA in that situation, where the echo time was, reverb time was about 3 seconds. So that will keep it down. You keep the level way down.
Thank you. We are only an hour today. That happens occasionally here, and today is one of those days. A couple of things to note coming up. Tomorrow, I'm going to be sitting here talking with an old friend of mine, Michael Yanovich, who is an editor in Los Angeles. So if you're interested in editing as a craft, Michael's a good guy to listen to. He's been around the block a few times. Don't forget, tomorrow, we mentioned it earlier, but CJ is going to have in the antique equipment thing. CJ, do you want to say something really quick about what you plan to do?
Friday is vintage gear still in use. So we want to know, what is the oldest piece of glue that is still hanging around in your pipeline, in your workflow. It could be computers. It could be a video recorder. It could be, we reckon we're going to get quite a bit of audio gear. But we're excited to hear what everybody's been squirreling away and still finding some use for. So looking forward to it. I know there's some sleeper hits out there. I want to see David Brady's 20th anniversary Mac, though. He's got to use it sometimes.
I may set up a special camera for my entry in this. We'll see whether I have time over the course of the next 24 hours. Thank you all for being here today, as always. And our thank yous at the end of the show are incredibly important. It takes an enormous number of people to put this show on every day, scattered all over the world. We still have part of our back-end crew that's coming in from places like Paris and things like that. They're showing up because they want to be involved in this. And we just really appreciate everybody who makes this show possible every day. To you, our producers, everybody who put a question into the queue today. You know, you really do drive this show with your curiosity, your questions, and we are here to solve your problems, to hopefully give you the advice of long years of experience. Most of the people on the panel here you see have been in this business for a long time, and they've solved these problems. And I just think it's very cool that when you have an issue that you're not sure about, you've got a panel like this who can bring together all this expertise and perhaps help you move on faster, which is a great thing in this day and age. To the panelists who show up every day here to add their expertise to these questions, we hugely appreciate what you do. It is an astonishingly nice act to just say, I've spent all this time learning this, I've gone through it, I've got the war wounds to prove it, and now I'm going to help you get over this issue without having to stress as much as I probably had to, or someone on the panel had to when they originally solved it. And to our amazing back-end crew, the people who I mentioned just briefly before, who are quiet. You'll see their names in the credit roll that's going to happen in just a minute. They are the people who really quietly work in the back to bring this to you every day, and we thank them. We'll see you all tomorrow after hours, always running, so you can hop over there if you want to continue the discussion. See you tomorrow.
Thanks for letting me plug, Bill.
Oh, no problem. I think it's going to be a fascinating show. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm going to try and find one of these moth audio amplifiers. Huh? Does that look cool or not?
Look at that.
That's wow.
Yeah.
Every now and again, Friday, we're sitting around in the council meeting and we're like, somebody comes just out of left field with an idea and we're like, I love that.
Yeah.
Should be fun. That's me.
So just on vintage stuff for a second, just because I just did this, if you've got Neumann microphones, you can send them the serial number and they'll tell you I think it's just year of manufacture. I don't think they gave me a month. So I just got a bunch of them back. Telling me that mine are mostly late 80s, early 90s.
That's nice.
So, but it's really nice you can get that service from them.
I'm astonished at how much microphone counterfeiting goes on out there. I've had more than a few people on the narrator websites say, I just got